India's struggle to gain independence from the British took on many dimensions. It was a political and a revolutionary struggle, but importantly, it was a struggle to establish our own intellectual and scientific movement. The struggle saw resurgence of India's scientific momentum and the rise of a new scientific community in the 19th century, which not only fought the discriminatory attitude of the British, but established an indigenous movement by Indians to reassert and carve their own unique identity.
You have numerous names, for example, Raja Ram Mohan Roy himself. He is known as the father of modern India. You have Vidyasagar, you have Akshay Kumar Datto, many names. Right from Ram Mohan Roy to Vivekanand, you have dozens and dozens of stars illuminating the Indian society, guiding the Indian society.
These stalwarts established journals and scientific societies and educational institutions to empower young Indians to think freely, to create, to discover, and importantly, to counter British subjugation and discrimination.
And first Swadeshi scientific institution, that is what is nationalistic scientific institution, was established in 1876 with a name Indian Association for Cultivation of Science. And the first generation of Indian scientists, they started learning science through this institution. So that is how he started nationalistic endeavor.
Towards the end of the 19th century, the idea of Swaraj or the independence of India began to take shape. Scientists like Acharya J.C. Bose and Praful Chandra Ray became powerful voices on the world stage. So in this episode of Science for a Self-reliant India, as we celebrate 75 years of India's hard-fought freedom from the yoke of colonial rule, we remember the sacrifice and contribution of 19th century thinkers and scientists who asserted themselves against the odds to rejuvenate India's rich historical heritage in science and technology, and created the foundations of India's scientific community to this day. This and much more only on India Science Independence Day Special. Welcome to this special series of Science for a Self-reliant India. And to commemorate India's 75 years of independence, we take you on a period of history that saw India's rising sentiments against British intellectual colonialism with a focus on areas of science and technology. We will also see the contribution of the Indian scientific community to establish indigenous intellectual and scientific institutions, journals, and traditions. The late 19th century and early 20th century also witnessed the birth of the movement of Swaraj and Swadeshi, and finally the call for an independent India. But before we delve into the contribution of our stalwarts, we first need to understand our country's advancements in science and technology going back hundreds of years. India had well-established knowledge systems in various fields like astronomy, medicine, Indian textiles, and steel making. Indian astronomy was lauded for its advanced instrumentation and accuracy of measurements which were at par with astronomical observations from Europe. India had flourishing astronomical observatories at Delhi, Jaipur, Mathura, and Varanasi. These were constructed by Savai Jai Singh. Over the centuries, India has contributed significantly to the field of science and mathematics. For example, the decimal place value system of numeration was first developed in India. Brahmagupta, an ancient Indian scholar and mathematician who lived in 628 AD, first defined the zero and its operation and also developed the first ever symbol for it. After that, another Indian mathematician, the astronomer Aryabhatta, used zero for the first time in the decimal system. India also had advanced irrigation systems, which were highly developed and varied according to the region's need and location. For example, in the arid regions of the Thar Desert, farmers used the Khadin system to store runoff water in tanks. In Maharashtra, they used the Fard system, and in South India, the method of Khudi Marammat was followed. Besides, we have historical evidence that Indians in the pre-British and British era had extensive knowledge about methods of grafting, harvesting techniques, and manure preparation. India also had an excellent record in mining and metallurgy. In fact, Indian iron and steel goods, which included weapons, were in high demand. Telangana had a unique distinction in metallurgy in medieval and pre-British times. Arms and armory made in Telangana were not only sought locally but also sent to other kingdoms as well. India is also the birthplace of the world-famous steel alloy known as Wootz steel. This pioneering steel alloy was invented in present-day Kodumanal, Erode in Tamil Nadu. Wootz steel of South India was far more superior than that made by the British and other Europeans. Production of Wootz steel required highly specialized techniques of refining iron with a process which created carbon nanotubes in the metal, thus making it rust-proof and also quite flexible when molded into swords.
The borders were porous, ideas kept coming, trade was vigorous, and lots of things were being made. Even our own steel making process, which is you referred to as Wootz, though it was done at a smaller level, but it was of such fine quality that it was exported to Syria. The famous Damascus blade was made out of it. Our textile was absolutely fabulous. The Dhaka Malmal you may have. We were exporting in 18th century. The balance of trade was in our favor.
Indians had knowledge and were capable of developing even sophisticated weaponry. An excellent example of this is Tipu Sultan's Agniban or Mysorean rockets. Mysorean rockets were an Indian military weapon, the first ever iron-cased rockets successfully deployed for military use.
In 1792, Tipu Sultan, when there was a fight between Tipu Sultan and British people, first time they could see the flying objects, Agniban, and they could never imagine that such weapon will be there in Indians' hands. And they started looking at all those things. Though Tipu could defeat them because of this weapon, they preserved that. They took that, all such things to England. They applied reverse engineering kind of thing. And because of that, they could excel in this rocket technology. And they have rightfully mentioned that all this knowledge came to us from India. So many such things are there in the pages of history. So we need to explore such things.
India's colonial history is also the history of British industrialization. In fact, conquest, colonialism, and European industrialization were deeply connected. So India became a rich source of basic raw materials and commodities such as cotton, silk, indigo dye, salt, spices, tea and opium, but also transformed into a huge market for British-made manufactured goods. From a historical perspective, the tipping point or transition for the British from traders to colonizers of the Indian subcontinent can be broadly attributed to the Battle of Plassey, which took place in 1757. The rise of the British was accompanied by the systematic marginalization of India's rich legacy of indigenous knowledge systems. For example, India had a flourishing know-how and industry in the textile sector and handicrafts across the subcontinent. In fact, India is the birthplace of cotton manufacturing. Around 1750, just before the British conquered Bengal, India was the world's largest producer of cotton textiles and was known for its fine quality and exquisite craftsmanship. Indian cloth was extensively traded in Europe, Southeast Asia such as Java, Sumatra and Penang. Interestingly, from the 1680s, printed Indian cotton textiles were the craze in England and Europe, mainly for their exquisite floral designs, incomparable quality, fine texture and affordability. The aristocracy of England and the rich, including the Queen herself, wore clothes of Indian fabric. Some of the well-known Indian fabric of that period include Indian chits fabric, Dhaka muslin, Kashmiri exquisite shawls of very fine quality such as Jamawar, Pashmina, Shatush and Kani shawls. It is also said that Napoleon had gifted a fine quality Kashmiri shawl to his wife Empress Josephine in order to impress her. After the British occupied India, the industries and crafts in the country began to lose their patronage, and what followed was a process of deindustrialization of Indian industries. A well thought out strategy to make space for the sale of British goods. After winning the Battle of Plassey in 1757 and then the Battle of Buxar in 1764, the British decided to expand their hegemonic footprint in the entire country. The British also brought with them powerful cultural forces which over the years would influence as well as oppress everything which was considered Indian or indigenous. The colonial power extensively used science and scientific knowledge to exploit the natural resources of India. Surveys such as the Geographical Survey of India, Botanical Survey of India and others were carried out. The East India Company, which was leading this assault, decided to carry out surveys of India's natural resources in order to exploit them on a larger scale. For this objective, they established the Survey of India in 1767. The first survey was aimed at carrying out a comprehensive geological survey under the supervision of Bengal's first Surveyor General, Major James Rennell.
They are supposed to start a systematic study of natural resources of this land. So with that idea in mind, they established the Survey of India in 1767. So it was established by East India Company, the then rulers of this country, and they started studying with a very systematic approach, scientific approach, natural resources of this land. So that is how they started studying these minerals and many other things of this land. They could even map the crop pattern of this country through Survey of India. And because of that, with this systematic approach of studying natural resources of this country, they could then acquire or they could exploit or plunder all these natural resources with great magnitude.
The second survey was to assess India's natural resources, and this led to the formation of the Geological Survey of India, GSI, in 1851. Immediately after the surveys, the British started laying railway lines in the country. The idea behind the initiative was to consolidate Britain's hold on the country. India's first railway proposals were made in Madras in 1832. The Red Hill Railways and the country's first train ran from Red Hills to Chintra-Dipet Bridge in Madras in 1837. It was hauled by a rotary steam engine locomotive manufactured by William Avery. Built by Arthur Cotton, the railway was primarily used to transport laterite stone for road building work in Madras, which was an important port and military base for the British. Incidentally, the first passenger railway train in India started running between Boribandar, Bombay and Thane, a distance of 32 kilometers from 16th April 1853.
They started utilizing those technological tools to exploit our country. First thing is railways. If you look at the railway network of our country in those days, it was not meant for the people of India, for their travel from one place to another place. but specifically it was meant to collect natural resources from one place to Bombay, because Bombay was the nearest port for England.
The exploitation by the British was not limited to demography and local industry. Agriculture was at the top of the British agenda when it came to taking advantage of the country's resources. It also became an important source of revenue for the British and a vital source for raw materials for the British industrial sector. In fact, the colonies were known as plantations in Britain. Towards the end, numerous botanical investigations were carried out by the British to further their colonial interest. By the early 19th century, the British had begun consolidating their hold over large parts of India. A direct consequence of this was the emergence of cities like Calcutta, Madras and Bombay. These were all important centres for the British as garrisons and trading centres. Given their small numbers, the British also needed help from Indians to both run and expand their activities in India, and so they embarked on creating very basic educational institutions. Two of them stood out: the Madras Medical College, now called Chennai Medical College, established in 1835, and the Thomason College of Civil Engineering in 1847, now called IIT Roorkee. Like other institutions, these were founded to serve and strengthen British rule in India. Many people have been led to believe that the British established modern science and brought in technology to India for the good of its people. This is far from the truth. The British objective was to colonize and subjugate, not to develop India or make it prosperous. It was our own people, social reformers, academics, scientists, and even the common person who struggled and fought to create educational infrastructure in India. They fought against British discrimination and policies to start a movement for intellectual space and self-reliance in scientific knowledge and training. Over time, as the Indian middle class grew, they started raising their voices, demanding better education and facilities. Gradually, these voices became a movement for intellectual space and self-reliance in scientific knowledge and training. In 1816, Bengali social reformer and educationalist Raja Ram Mohan Roy raised a private subscription to establish the Calcutta Vidyalaya, which could offer instruction in the English language. Soon, a need was also felt by Indian intellectuals for imparting Western scientific education in Indian languages.
You know, right from early 19th century, there were several attempts. Raja Ram Mohan Roy brought out his own journal. Jambekar Sahib brought out his Bombay Darpan, and these were bilingual, one in English, the other in Indian language, Marathi, Bangla. Similarly, little later, you have school book societies being established. They also, Agra School Book Society, Kolkata School, Bombay School Book Society, they were publishing scientific tracts in Indian languages, respective Indian languages. And I'm sure all this created, a kind of demand, a kind of what you may call science popularization. It was at a very limited scale, but it worked.
Western scientific texts and research was also published in various Indian journals in local languages by Indian scholars and scientists. Master Ramachandar, a 19th century Indian mathematician of exceptional caliber, started teaching on scientific rationality. Ramachandar taught mathematics at Delhi College in the 1840s. He wrote numerous articles on science, technology, scientists and scientific temper in two of his journals, Fawaid-ul-Nazareen and Muhabbi-Hind. He is credited for carrying out original research work in mathematical sciences. His treatise on the problems of maxima and minima in 1850 and a specimen of a new method of differential calculus got quite known in scholarly circles and even won laurels from his British counterparts.
You have numerous names, for example, Raja Ram Mohan Roy himself. He is known as the father of modern India. You have Vidyasagar, you have Akshay Kumar Datto. Many names, right from Ram Mohan Roy to Vivekanand, you have dozens and dozens of stars illuminating the Indian society, guiding the Indian society. And we need to keep in mind that this created some kind of, convulsions in thought processes. So we received Comtean positivism, we received Darwinism, we received Pasteurian ideas, the revolution, Louis Pasteur's on germ theory, many things came. And our people, highly educated, of course, they were the upper middle class, they responded to it. Lots of articles were written in Indian languages, in Marathi. For example, Jambekar Sahab, Balashastri Jambekar, Shubhaji Bapu, many others, who appreciated some of the European ideas and they wanted to weigh it with the traditional knowledge. They didn't want to discard traditional knowledge, Siddhantas. They took it and tried to weigh. In fact, the great educationist Vidyasagar used to teach in his college both Shastric astronomy and new astronomy, European astronomy.
In Bombay, Bal Gangadhar Shastri Jambekar, the first Indian assistant professor of mathematics at Elphinstone College, did work on theories of equations and calculus in Marathi. Gangadhar Shastri was perhaps the first Indian to start a journal in 1832 for popularizing science and establishing the Native Education Society. The journal was called Bombay Darpan or the Bombay Mirror. He is also known as the father of Marathi journalism. Science and scientific inquiry was pursued beyond the boundaries of traditional sciences and local knowledge systems. Western science was pursued to fulfill the growing aspiration of knowledge expansion by the newly emerging middle class. There were constant endeavors to start and establish scientific societies in the country. Eugene Lefort opened a physics laboratory which was a meteorological observatory at St. Xavier's College in Calcutta. With this, St. Xavier's earned a reputation of excellence in science teaching and attracted a number of young Indian scholars. Eugene Lefort was also the founder of the first ever Scientific Society of India. An important milestone in India's scientific education and culture came when Mahendra Lal Sarkar, a graduate from Medical College of Calcutta, established the Calcutta Journal of Medicine in 1868. This was a precursor to Sarkar's crucial role as the founder of the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science in 1876. Both the journal and the association played a pioneering role in the growth and development of modern science in India. Mahendra Lal Sarkar, who was a physician, an academic and a science visionary, openly challenged his British mentors and asserted that European medical practice and theory was logically not superior to traditional Indian medicine.
The Kolkata Journal of Medicine, that was the name of that title of that journal, and that was initiated by Mahendra Lal Sarkar. And in his first editorial, he said that let us come together and establish scientific institution by Indians and for Indians. So that first issue of that, the Kolkata Journal of Medicine, came out in 1868, and first Swadeshi scientific institution, that is what is nationalistic scientific institution, was established in 1876 with a name Indian Association for Cultivation of Science. And the first generation of Indian scientists, they started learning science through this institution.
Indian scientists faced a lot of resistance from the British in their attempt to popularize and communicate Western science to the common Indians. They also faced discrimination at the hands of colonizers in acquiring jobs which suited their caliber and capabilities. Some of them actively began to take part in the resistance movement. In 1883, Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee, a well-known mathematician and lawyer, led a group of protesting students against the arrest of S.N. Banerjee. Banerjee was arrested for his article which he wrote in the newspaper Bengali. This important period of Indian history also witnessed the rise of the Indian middle class. who resisted the economic and social cultural assaults of the British, as well as the discrimination which was practiced in fields such as medicine, engineering, scientific teaching, and research, just to name a few. This new emerging intelligentsia not only fought for political freedom, but also sought to establish their own knowledge systems, especially in areas of modern science and technology, while preserving and protecting indigenous knowledge ecosystems. In the years that followed the establishment of the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science, a movement began to take form, an assertion for an Indian identity, and ultimately the call for Swaraj. In our next episode, we explore the important role of Acharya J.C. Bose and Acharya Praful Chandra Ray and other luminaries who encouraged and fostered India's scientific movement. We also delve into the movement of Swaraj and Swadeshi and ultimately the call for India's independence. This and much more on our special series on the freedom struggle and the scientific community, only on India Science.